Hi there, and welcome back to another edition of ScaleUp Radio, the podcast inspired by the entrepreneurial ScaleUp system and designed to make navigating our ScaleUp journeys that little bit easier by learning from others' experiences. I'm Kevin Brent, and this week on the show, we bring you one of our panel discussion episodes where we look at a particular aspect of scaling up and discuss it with our panel participants, who are all business owners and leaders in their own right. And this time, we dive into the crucial concept of psychological safety and its impact on teams and businesses. Psychological safety creates a trust-filled environment where people can take risks, ask questions, and voice differing opinions without fear of backlash. And it's the bedrock of high-performing teams and healthy, constructive conflict. We'll discuss the challenges of fostering this safety, also in remote settings, increasingly relevant nowadays, and the importance of hiring for cultural fit and how to balance psychological safety with the need for productive tension and innovation. So make sure you don't miss this or any future episodes by subscribing to ScaleUp Radio wherever you like to listen to your podcasts. For now, join us to learn how you can build a culture that not only supports but thrives on openness and trust. So, psychological safety. Let's just explore what people have taken away. Maybe Claire, if it's all right with you, do you want to kick us off as to what you took away?
It's funny because the parts of psychological safety that Fiona touched on was kind of, in a way, not new to me, but it wasn't where I was thinking of when I was thinking of psychological safety. So I suppose maybe it's just what I do within my business, but I've always looked at it as, from an employee point of view, I suppose, is allowing that space where employees can make errors to some extent, and not get things right, but in the safety that they're not going to get absolutely, bollocked, and that they can safely make those errors as long as there is learning from that, and obviously they don't continue. But that's kind of how I've always come at psychological safety. It's kind of is that side of it, really.
And what did you take from Fiona that was different?
She didn't really come at it from that side. She was talking more from, was it client side? And I can't remember now what she was talking from.
I think she was talking about this, like cultivating a culture of well-being, and it being around well-being. And that it's very, very personal. Psychological safety is very personal to the person, means different things to different people within the organisation. So it starts about being like curious about yourself and people understanding themselves so they can feel safe. And that's different for different people.
Yeah, and I think where I'm
really
come at it from was more of it within employees within the business and being safe to make, to learn, and while they're learning, make some errors and things like that.
Yeah.
And not be afraid to kind of ask questions. And I suppose that's where the be curious comes from, not be afraid to ask questions and, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And Mel's, thank you, Mark, because that be curious about yourself was one of the key things as well, wasn't it? That you came out with about really, because the whole thing about whether it's for the employees or for the business in general, that whole thing about starting with ourselves is really important there. And if we don't create the environment and lead by that kind of example, then how can we expect the others to do it? I guess is a big part of that. So Matt, what's your take on the whole aspect of psychological safety?
I'll put my hand up wholeheartedly and say I haven't read the pamphlet, so I can only take my take on it, actually following what Claire was saying. Because I did wonder if psychological safety was just another meaning for mental health sort of side of it, is what my initial take on it was. But actually listening to Claire, actually it's I can see it from both sides of the fence, and talking about my own psychological safety, to put it, if I can't depend on my team to deliver on the services that I put myself against, then I'm always going to worry and be in this anxiety circle of wondering if, when, how, and it doesn't fill them with confidence either that I'm doubting everything that they do.
Yeah.
So there's that element of it being the business owner of it, and actually taking on board actually what Claire says is actually, I suppose, from their perspective, being comfortable to be able to raise problems, have a bit of an open door policy. You don't want someone to be shoehorned into one particular way of thinking and thinking, well, is it this way in the highway, or can I be constructive? And I'd like to say, as a workplace, we always very keep an open mind. Everybody's come from different backgrounds and different sectors and different experiences. And if there's something we can do as an organisation to be better and take on board people's thoughts and feelings around how we do things and how we talk to employees or how we deal with situations, then I'm all for it. It's definitely, the world's changed, hasn't it, an awful lot since the days when I was an employee for somebody else.
Yeah.
Whereby it's now so much more about the employee and how they feel and respecting one another, rather than it be, well, if you don't do your job, you're out the door. It's very different, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's got a lot of aspects to it. The thing that I always, I think, with all of the work we do with all the business owners, all the interviews we have on ScaleUp Radio, it doesn't matter what the business is, as long as there's people in the business, then pretty much everybody comes around to saying, that's the thing you've got to get right. And the foundation of most of the theoretical models, if you like, or the academic research, or if you want to pick up any frameworks or anything like that, the majority of them have got some element of trust as the keystone of them. And if you take the what's the forming, norming, one, the Tuckman stages of team development, right? So they go. He basically says teams go through four stages. There's the forming of it in the first place. Then there's the kind of the storming bit where you're understanding all sorts of stuff about each other, and you're really forming that team and how you work together. But then you get into the norming stage where you understand the relationships very well. But then finally, it's the breakthrough is into that real performing stage. And to do that breakthrough, he says that the psychological safety is a key aspect of doing that. If you take the Patrick Lencioni's 5 behaviors model, and if that's like a pyramid, and the foundation level of that pyramid is the psychological safety, because without that you can't move into the constructive debate bit, the conflict that he talks about it. But the whole aspect of trust and psychological safety is the foundation of many of the teamwork models, including the 5 behaviors. So I like the Patrick Lencioni one, and in fact I was talking with somebody on ScaleUp Radio the other day who's built a business with over 200 people in it in about 6 years, and he, although he didn't call it the 5 behaviors model or Patrick Lencioni, he was talking about all of the elements of it essentially. And you need to create an environment where you can have that constructive debate, so that it's not just a case of everybody follow me, but equally it's not a case of backfighting and stabbing and politics and all of that kind of thing. You want to have good constructive debate around issues and ideas, not around people's views and personal opinions and things, because if you can't get that done, then you can't get through into the committing to what we're going to do, and then really driving through for those results. So lots of these models, although they lay them out differently, so the Tucker one is laid out very differently from the 5 behaviors, but it's the same sort of concepts in many ways, and trust is absolutely key within that. And in the way that you've heard us talk about the stepping stones within businesses of going from the different stages, the one where we're trying to get from beyond the up to sort of 10 employees level, if we're trying to break through to that, we have to be able to get the team driving things forward as a team, and it can't just be us driving it. And therefore we have to create this culture or this environment of where people feel able to take on roles, as Claire was saying, without fear of making mistakes and being fired or whatever, but that they've got each other's backs. So it's that kind of stuff. Gary, anything you'd add, bring in here?
I think, like you say, that I think that trusting from a psychological safety point of view, try to build each department of kind of 4 or 5 people. Hopefully each colleague, each team member understands they'll be supported if they need any help or, they make a mistake. I think that's quite important. But I think in some businesses, if you've got kind of a high performing team, it's important that they understand their kind of shared goal or their mission, and what's expected from them and what's expected from their team. If they understand that, you would hope that the psychological safety, would naturally sort of be there. But I think, as you mentioned as well, trust is the other important side of this. And from like a employment perspective, I think the trust side of things would naturally be there, hopefully, with time. If somebody's consistently performing, you would hope that would naturally kind of build trust within that person. But I think it can, on the flip side of it, if trust isn't there, it can be kind of really quite dangerous for a business. It can almost lead to quite a toxic environment, can't it? And sort of office politics if there's not any trust there. So it needs to be addressed pretty quickly, really.
All right. Good. Thank you.
It's
Peter?
interesting how, can I just add, on the back of what Gary's just said, though, it's interesting how hybrid working or actually more remote working, home working, has actually affected psychological safety, because we're not having the teams working together so much now and building that kind of, team bonding, that kind of thing. So that's quite interesting as well.
I think that's a really good aspect of it, because what you just said there just emphasised the fact that we have to therefore work that much harder at it. We had to work at it before, and sometimes maybe in some businesses it naturally happened, and it was good. And then throwing in the remote working on top of it has just challenged that status quo again. And we've really got to work at it. Yeah.
I think that links a little bit into, if we're talking about models today, but if you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, for example, which is more about you as an individual. And we know that the kind of baseline for that is all around kind of feeling safe and warm and fed. And I think in this remote working world we live in now, understanding the environments that our employees are actually working in, because not everybody has got a nice, warm, safe, peaceful home to work in. And so for organisations with probably more employees and maybe more kind of junior members of staff, or maybe single parents or whatever it might be, it's understanding that will have a massive impact on people if they haven't got the environment to be productive and perform within as well. So it's even more important now to try and understand individuals and what their motivations are, what really influences their day to day. Whereas I think, previously everyone just comes into the office and you can control that as an employer, can't you? If you create a nice working environment, you can control that so much easier than you can when people are working in their own environments and they've got a lot of distractions. And they can't psychologically leave their home life to come to work. They're just there at work.
And they feel less belonging of a team as well, don't they? Because they don't actually, apart from maybe a team get together once a month or once a quarter, they don't actually feel that they belong like they used to, like in an office, you have these like water cooler conversations, do you see Corey last night? Oh yeah, blah, blah, blah. They don't have that anymore, do they?
Yeah.
Well, not in remote working.
Peter, what's your thoughts dealing with recruitment and
I think it makes an impact on who you recruit. And one of the things I think there is that because we're doing remote work, it's harder to get through sometimes those early stages of psychological safety. And you've kind of almost got to bring that back into the recruitment process and look at where have people come from and what they've been used to. And is that going to fit, kind of almost like culture? Is it going to fit with what you're trying to create there? So, I worked in businesses that were, completely unpsychologically safe, through to businesses that were probably too psychologically safe.
Right.
And I think you could take someone from one culture and it would be really hard to get them integrated into the other culture because they're not used to it. So therefore you've got to put a lot more time into kind of either the upfront piece or assessing, are they ever going to become comfortable in that environment that you're trying to create? So I think that's really difficult to do, particularly when you're doing kind of remote hiring. It used to be very much that you'd speak to somebody on the phone, you'd invite them into the office, you'd then get them to meet a couple of the other team members in the office for the second interview, and maybe do some testing. And now we're seeing people almost doing 2 Zoom calls and being made an offer and then starting with the company. It's really hard for them, one, as an individual, to assess whether is this company psychologically safe for me to work in, but also for the company to then assess how they're going to perform in this culture. Are they used to a trusting environment where they're just left to get on with it? And particularly when, as Mel said, if you're recruiting more junior members of staff, they're not used to any environments. So it then becomes really hard to assess how they're going to perform and stay with the business, which is why we're probably seeing high levels of churn when it comes to hiring.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, very good. Paul, what about you? So you came along to ScaleUp Club and you heard Fiona McKinnon as well, and had a bit of a discussion in in the 2 groups that you were part of actually at ScaleUp Club around financial transparency and stuff like that as well. But what's your take on the psychological safety from ScaleUp Club and from the notes we sent out?
I've got loads of opinions, not all correct. I think for us, I was thinking about, I wonder if it sounds really bad, but I wonder if it's to do with the type of work. So like, I was thinking about, well, what are the differences remote, past work in X, Y, Z? For us, we are trying to get people to innovate and be creative. And I believe to do that, you need to be really open, honest, transparent. You need to be have a healthy debate, and you need to also be criticized to a degree and challenged. And you need to be confident in your own beliefs that you can argue and debate, but also accept that actually there's other ways of doing things and different ways. And that's the whole point of team working. If you're not going to take on other people's opinions, you might as well work on your own. Like that's the whole point of a team, is that the sum of all parts is better than the individual. I could see the argument, because it was interesting when Pete was just saying about, and some environments where people flourish and it's not psychologically safe. If it's just a job to be done and you just need people to do it, it's kind of, I could see why it goes out the door, and it's almost, they're just a commodity, which I don't agree with that either. But I think that the type of work you do, for us, we have recently hired and fired somebody that was turning the culture toxic, and it was entirely based on psychological kind of safety factors and culture and everything else. So I think it's completely interlaced with your values and your vision and your culture. What was interesting as an anecdote is yesterday I went on to a boot camp demo day all day, and they started their presentations and everyone started with psychological safety. They did like a manifesto, and they talked about how they created psychological safety before they even got to like the problem and the solution and how they worked. And then you could see that when they got to the end of their presentations, what they delivered, they'd learned as they were going along about challenging each other and having openness. And there's no way they could have delivered anything. They had 4 weeks, and it was phenomenal, the products they were building. Yeah. And that was from the very start. They took that whole mantra of people need to feel safe. It's okay not to be okay. Like, communicate. Like, if you're not going to be able to turn up, it's fully remote boot camp. If you've got stuff going on in your outside life, just be honest and let us know. And I thought they were really, it was quite an interesting thing that this was being taught to people right now who are entering the workplace. That is a critical thing. So again, thinking about recruiting, you're going to come across as a Luddite if you're not talking to people about psychological safety when you're hiring, aren't you? You're going to look like it's not something you've even considered. So to me, where it was interesting on the scale up was it's really important to us doing our best work as a team, the existing team, and maintaining that and valuing it. But it's as important that we get the right people into the team who share those values and embrace that. It is important. If you hire somebody and they don't value it, and they're quite autocratic and their way is, the only way, it's not going to work, is it? So, but I could see that you could have autocratic workforces where it's literally you're a person doing a job and they don't value. I've been in those roles. I've packed nuts in a box. You know, they don't care about my psychological safety. It's like
how many nuts you can pack in a minute.
yeah, exactly. It was literally that. So I've done those jobs. So like, yeah.
Yeah, and I some really, really interesting insights there, Paul. Love that. And yeah, there are times when you just have to get on with it, aren't you? But if you've got the foundation right, then people understand that, and they understand that now's the time to just knuckle down. And you tend to think of the military as being very autocratic, to use the word that you were just using, Paul. And you know, everybody's just told what to do, but actually the military functions because of the psychological safety and the trust that people have got in those units. You know, somebody was talking about units of 4 or 5, 6 a minute ago, because the way it's structured is like that, and everybody's got their own back and they understand that. It's not to say that there isn't, you know, it works all the time, but that's kind of the fundamental foundation really of the military, is that got each other's back. The buddy sort of system is cultivated right from the very start. You generally, right from training, you buddy up, you know, with an individual, and each of you then helps each other out. You got watches out for you, and even just silly things like when you've got an inspection and you know your buddy's telling you got a bit of fluff on your collar or something. Just that right through to obviously if you're out in the field. So yeah, really, really interesting.
There was a guy yesterday, and he was ex-Navy. He was coming out of the Navy, and his team by far were the most productive. They produced more work than anyone else. And when I drilled them on like the project lead, who is it? They were talking about this guy. And the one thing he said is in the Navy and in like all the military, there's like this instant trust. You've all got shared trauma. You've all got like skin in the game, and that's what he built into the team. And it was fascinating that you had like the only difference, but they literally produced 4 times the amount of work of anyone else. And the only thing I could see the difference was this guy was so disciplined, but he built that kind of thing, safety around it all. And he was like drilling into them almost like the military approach to leadership.
Yeah, great.
It was fascinating.
So you've made me think of going back to the initial training in the RAF, and what you just said then about different backgrounds. You've got shared trauma in that instance. Yeah. But at the very beginning, of course, you've got a group of people group of cadets that have come from all walks of life. Some have got a university degree, maybe just come out. So some are maybe even medics. Others have literally just come out of school, and they might even be 16. Well, actually, typically 18 if you go in the officer training. But you know, they've come and have a completely different, diverse range of backgrounds. And the first 6 weeks of military training is all about stripping everybody down to the basic and getting rid of all of your airs and graces, if you like, and getting everybody to be the same. It's all physically hard. You all do exactly the same things. You all get treated pretty badly, frankly, at the beginning, and you're taken all down to the point where your real vulnerable self comes out. You're put in stressful situations, and they take everybody to that level first, and then they build you up from there, and then that's how those bonds really happen. And you're in units of around about eight people in a little unit. That's how it's done, and you get to know those people really, really well, and trust in it. Now, I'm not suggesting that we need to go quite to those
Kevin
extremes.
Told me I need to beat you down to build you back.
That's so every time you get
smart balls this week.
Yeah, every time you get a new employee, that's it. Yeah. But it is interesting because that some way of removing the barriers so that we all understand, as Mel said right at the very beginning, that we all understand each other fully, and we have that mutual respect, because we've got to have that bit of respect for each other as well. So how do we get that and build on? Mel,
just thinking of something now, like in pursuit, I mean, it is just throwing the cat amongst the pigeons, but in pursuit of psychological safety, does anybody think we're at risk of not being brave, not embracing the benefits of diversity, and sitting in our comfort zones?
I think it's completely the opposite. It's to expel all of those things. it's not a fluffy, to me, psychological safety isn't a fluffy thing to just address and tick a box. It's like
that's my point, really, Paul. Yeah, that's my point. Because I'm thinking, we don't want to upset the apple cart with the existing team. So what we'll do is we'll just bring someone in that's just the same, and therefore you end up in a situation where you haven't got that diversity of thinking, and therefore you're stifling your ability to be innovative and have different perspectives and ideas and thoughts from people from different backgrounds, because hang on a minute, we've got to keep everybody safe, we've got to keep everybody happy. People aren't used to working with coloured people, or people aren't used to working with, Matt's had the recent experience of obviously having a transgender member of staff. So I think we have to be a little bit careful with not being too in pursuit of keeping everyone that you've currently got safe. You're not bringing in something that could really drive innovation and positivity in your business.
Yeah. On that note, so do you know what? In 15 years of doing web development and digital marketing, some of my best members of staff have probably been very borderline in between both aspects, really. And it's a fine balance, really, Mel, as you say. Like, if you have got an ultra safe environment, do you have that drive? Do you have that kind of edge, that little bit of nerves on the performance side of things? I think sometimes it sounds kind of crazy, but you can almost go the wrong way and be too safe, can't you? And
too safe.
I think it's interpretation, isn't it? It's interpretation, because I look at psychological safety as creating the best level playing field to enable everyone to be the best version of themselves and be as performant as they can.
Yeah.
But you could easily go the other end of the pendulum and say, we're looking after everybody, everybody's okay. And actually there's no motivation to do any work ever, because everybody's safe and content. And we know that the biggest decisions and the biggest impact we have on our businesses is, like you say, when we go outside of our comfort zone and we try something new. But you need the psychological safety to say to everybody, if we're going to make this decision, go in this direction, we're all in it together. I don't want it to be Paul's made this decision. I want it to be that it's a everybody understands why we're going there, and it's that openness and transparency to explain, rather than just be, I said so, get on with it. That to me is the massive difference. But you could easily, it's interpretation, isn't it? You could look at psychological safety and go, well, what a load of fluff that is. Yeah, and it's going to slow me down, whereas it's intended to accelerate.
Exactly. I think it's a really good. It's only sort of come out towards the end of this conversation, but I think that's really, really powerful stuff, actually, Mel. Because, and thank you for raising that, because we hear about, forget psychological safety, just talk about culture. We hear about creating a culture where everybody feels good about each other and all that. That's not what culture really is about. It's not about just having it all fluff and all being nice. And it's let's put our arms around each other and cuddle and and there's never any stress. That's not what it is. We're talking about a high performance culture here. We want high performing teams. That doesn't mean it's all going to be rosy and we're not going to have disagreements. If we go back to the Lencioni model, the second level up is conflict, but it's constructive conflict. And that's what we need to create the environment, is where we feel comfortable to have differences of opinions on ideas and approaches, not on backgrounds and personal aspects, but we're able to have those proper discussions in order to move the business forwards. So it's that high performance culture that we're looking for. And what does that mean to us? And the other aspect there, we want to solicit other people's views, but we don't want to run by committee. Yeah, we're not running a business by, let's take a vote then. And, 6 of us said we'll do that way and 5 said not. So, we'll go with the 6. It's not that. Our role as a leader is to find a way to have the debate, create the environment where we can have the debates around the issue and everybody can have their say and we can solicit the right opinions. But it's our role to then bring it back to what we're going to do. And it won't always be the consensus. That's not what it'll be. It'll sometimes be, actually, great, I've listened to what you said, Paul, and Claire, However, what we're going to do is we're going to go this way, which is where we need to try. I recognise that we don't absolutely know the answer, so maybe we'll trial this for 3 months and we'll review it. Is that all right, Paul and Claire? But when we come back, we'll review it then. It's perhaps more that kind of approach.
I think the example I can think of, a really recent one, is it was one where I genuinely believe this is direction of travel, and then you have initial discussion with the team, and they're not warm to it at all. They're like pessimistic about it. But what it enables you to do is you can start to understand the risk that they see. So then your job is just to go, okay, that's really good, because actually I hadn't even thought of that. I hadn't thought of that risk. So then you can go and de-risk it and come back. So it's over several conversations that I'll be able to say, I've listened, and this is how I propose it. Is everyone happy? So it's not a committee. It's like, because people have different opinions, you want to, they'll be doing things in their role that you won't even see, because you're not supposed to be doing their job. So like they'll see risk, and your job as a leader is to make decisions and de-risk those decisions, and you need the input of your team. And if you haven't got an open culture, they're not going to come to you, or they're not going to go to them.
I think the other thing to think about there is that we're kind of talking about the teams as if they're already fully formed and being psychologically safe. And I think one of the other things to realise, possibly going back to recruitment, but every time we bring a new member into the team, we kind of drop to the bottom of the pyramid, and we've got to go through that whole process again. People can't slot into the team out there. We're fully trusting, we understand each other, we're a psychologically safe culture. As soon as you introduce a new person or a new dynamic, you're always starting again, and you can't hop between the different levels. So it's an ongoing process. It's not something we get to as a solid state and then go, hey, we're psychologically safe, we're performing, and we're all amazing. Because as soon as we add that new team member from whatever background, we kind of take ourselves back down to, we're a new team, not a team that's psychologically safe with a new member. We're a whole new team to kind of start with. So you have to kind of then rerun the whole process, whether it's accelerated or not. But I think it's certainly something worth mentioning.
I hope you enjoyed that discussion, and if you're building and scaling your own business, you might well be interested in our book, The Entrepreneurial ScaleUp System. And it's exactly what it says on the tin. It's a practical handbook around scaling a business in a structured way. And you can order a copy on all your favorite online retailers, including an audio version, or you can find it and other supporting resources on our website, www.esusgroup.co.uk. That's esusgroup.co.uk, which is esusgroup.co.uk.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.